Om Brahmanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Dvandvatitam Ganganasadrisham Tattvamasyadilaksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamachalam Sarvadi Sakshibhutam Bhavatitam Trigunarahitam Sadgurum Tam Namami.
Dear Seeker of Truth, welcome. This work that we are going to talk about is one of the most sacred dialogues because it happens between two enlightened beings. One is Ashtavakra, the other is King Janaka, which was Ashtavakara's disciple. So in it you will have a glimpse of the instruction of an enlightened being so that you can achieve liberation, and also the vision of how a liberated being stands, acts, what is his experience. So pay attention to these teachings, fill your heart with surrender, devotion, sacredness, because that is the way to enjoy it the most. May it blossom in your heart, may you also find liberation. Moving on, third chapter of Ashtavakra Samhita. Now it is the tests of self-realization. So after Janaka expounded his self-realization, Ashtavakra comes and questions it and tests the so-called self-realization. So Ashtavakra said, having known yourself as really indestructible and one, how is it that you, knower of the self and serene, feel attached to the acquisition of wealth? Let us remind that Janaka was a king and was performing his duty as a king. So in the story, of course, the speech here, which is written here, is about expounding all these different aspects of self-realization. It is enriching because it is between two self-realized beings. And it's a conversation that could only happen between two self-realized beings. In any other way, it couldn't happen because it wouldn't make sense. The one that's not self-realized would not understand the answers. So in the stories that are told, Janaka wanted to abandon his kingmanship, his duties as a king. And it is very important to outline that a king in the society, in Indian society, for example, it was about duties. So people see life as the accomplishment of desires, but in this case, it is about duties and doing one's duty. So Janaka, his duty was to be a king. That was his duty, not his desire. And he wanted to stop that, but Ashtavakra didn't allow it. This supposedly is the real story. But let's follow the dialogue. So Ashtavakra starts questioning because he is seeing Janaka performing his duties as a king, and the king has to expand his kingmanship, his kingdom, and do all those things that apparently are contrary to the state of a self-realized being. How do you feel attached to acquisition of wealth? Asks Ashtavakra. Because if you have known yourself to be the indestructible one, and if you are a knower of the self and serene, why do you have those needs of acquisition? Because the liberated one doesn't hanker for anything of that. He is self-realized. He is fullness in itself. So these needs do not arise. Alas, as greed arises from illusion of silver, caused by the ignorance of the mother pearl, even so arises attachment to the objects of illusory perception from ignorance of the self. Again, he is continuing this line of the need for acquisition of wealth and attachment that comes to the objects of the senses. And that this is only possible if ignorance of the self is still there. So if he is self-realized, how can this be? How can there be greed if there's only fullness? Having known yourself to be that in which the universe appears like waves on the sea, why do you run about like a miserable being? So in this case, a miserable being is a delusion being that runs around in the search for sense pleasures, happiness. So this is a miserable being, and it is miserable because he doesn't know the ultimate treasure. He is not a king of the self. So he is a miserable being. And this is why he runs around here and there in the quest of the objects of the senses, to get something that reduces a little bit of its own misery. So, but if you have known yourself to be that in which the universe appears, if you are the all in all, how can you run around like a miserable being? Says Ashtavakra. So Ashtavakra here, he is not playing very nice. But these are very interesting questions, and so will the answers be. After hearing oneself to be pure consciousness, unsurpassingly beautiful, how can one yet be deeply attached to sensual objects and thus become impure? So here he is hinting about being exposed to the teachings, not the realization itself, but be exposed to the teachings. And if it is a pure soul, these teachings are enough to stop these lustful investments. So after hearing oneself to be pure consciousness and surpassingly beautiful, how can one yet be deeply attached to sensual objects and thus become impure, running after lust, desiring others? It is strange that the sense of ownership should still continue in the wise one who has realized the self in all and all in the self. So again, a king has possessions, has the kingdom, has all of this, and his duties are about maintaining and increasing that kingdom. And this is a confusion, of course, that arises in kings, because their duty of being kings is to take care of the kingdom. They are representatives of the people, of their own people. So they are not actually the rulers of the people, but they are there to take care of the people. But confusion always arises in all situations. So he is hinting that it is very strange, because if you have realized the self in all and all in the self, How can this sense of ownership is still arising in this wise one? Because if you have realized the self, all in the self and the self in all, there's nothing but the self. So how can there be any ownership of anything? And how can there be anything to be owned? It is strange that one abiding in the supreme non-duality and intent on liberation, yet be subject to lust and weakened by the practice of amorous pastimes. So, well, it doesn't seem that he is giving too much credit from these stances to the self-realization of Janaka. And he is telling, so one who is abiding in a supreme non-duality that recognizes no others, he is pure fullness, and intent on liberation. This is strange. Abiding in one abiding in supreme non-duality and intent on liberation. This is contradiction. But okay. So he's saying, because he is not affirming that he is in the supreme non-duality, that he is abiding in the supreme non-duality, but he's saying that he is intent on liberation, yet be subject to lust and weakened by the practice of amorous pastimes. Weakened by the practice of amorous pastimes has different meanings. But weaken, it's about the ojas, that it is wasted through the sexual practice. And subject to lust, one that feels compelled and, well, subject to lust, yes. And then by it being weakened, losing his spiritual energy. Continuing, it is strange that knowing lust to be an enemy of knowledge, a man who has grown extremely weak and reached his last days should yet be eager for sensual enjoyment. So again, lust being an enemy of knowledge, and this is interesting because everybody these days hints at the practices that feed the notion of duality, like meditation or other spiritual disciplines. But nobody mentions lust engagements, sexual enjoyments as something that feeds this notion of duality, which is quite interesting. And it is justified in another manner. The logic is complicated. But okay, let's continue with Ashtavakra, with his exposition. So lust to be an enemy of knowledge for many reasons. First, because, well, it compromises the purification of the energy, and it wastes the ojas, the spiritual energy. So consciousness becomes more difficult to rise. It feeds the notion of duality. It mixes your energy with your confusion with others' confusion and connects you to others, making your energy be, how do you say this, drained, as these connections are there. It has many different things. So it is strange that a man who has grown extremely weak and reached his last days as an old man and should still yet be eager for sensual enjoyment after already having so many and being exposed to the wisdom. Again, it is strange that one who is unattached to the objects of this world and the next, self-realized one, who discriminates the eternal from the transient, and who longs for emancipation should yet fear dissolution of the body. Well, Ashtavakra must be observing the behaviors of the body of Janaka, and the king is taken care by physicians and this and that, and he is associating these ongoing situations with the worries of Janaka himself. Or is he giving just an opportunity for Janaka to clarify all these stances for the one who is going to read this? Probably it is more so, because Ashtavakra was King Janaka's master, and the master knows the disciple very well. So it is strange that one who is unattached to the objects of the world, of this world and the next, who discriminates the eternal from the transient, and who longs for emancipation, again, it is not hinting that he is self-realized, but a seeker of truth, should yet fear dissolution of the body. Strange. Fettered and feasted or tormented, the serene person ever sees the absolute self and is thus neither gratified nor angry. So it doesn't matter in which circumstances the self-realized being is. He is not gratified nor anger despite what seems to be happening. And again, he must be hinting at some behaviors that are observable in King Janaka. The high-souled person witnesses his own body acting as if it were another's. As such, how can he be disturbed by praise or blame? So again, he must be recognizing some behaviors. Some must be seeing some behaviors and bringing them up for clarification. So the high-souled person witnesses his own body acting as if it were another's, because he knows he is not the body. He is the self, his self-realized being. So he observes that body as any other body, more or less. As such, how can he be disturbed by praise or blame if he doesn't, if he is not identified with that body? How can he be disturbed, affected by praise to that body or blame to that body? Realizing this universe as mere illusion and losing all curiosity, how can one of steady mind yet fear the approach of death? So if you have realized that this universe is just an illusion, of course, and if you did so, you have lost all curiosity, because how can you be curious about that which doesn't exist? How can this one steady of mind? Because if you have reached this level, you have become one of steady mind. Lost all curiosity, so mind doesn't wander here and there anymore. So it becomes steady, without moving, yet fears the approach of death, which is concerned about only the body. With whom can we compare that great souled one who is content with self-knowledge and does not anchor even after liberation? With whom can we compare that great souled one who is content with self-knowledge and does not hanker even after liberation? Of course, if he is contented with self-knowledge, it means he has self-knowledge, he already is self-realized. So how can he hanker after liberation if he has already been liberated? But of course, in liberation, that which acknowledges its true nature, the concept of liberation disappears, because the concept of bondage has disappeared, because the universe and the body has disappeared, because he has realized his real self. With who can we compare this? Apart with someone else who has reached the same state. With no one else. Why should that steady-minded one, who knows the object of perception to be in its very nature nothing, considers one thing acceptable and another unacceptable? Again, he must observing the behaviors of the king, attitudes and commands of the king, and he is questioning, why should that steady-minded one, the one who has realized the nature of the world, of itself, of the self, lost all curiosity, so the mind becomes steady, has nowhere to go, who knows the object of perception to be in its very nature nothing. So all objects of perception, the body and the universe, to be nothing, because that's what they are. Consider one thing acceptable and another unacceptable. It is strange from this point of view. We will have this clarification. Because this is observation of the body and the body's attitudes. But the thing is, the only difference is identification with the body or no identification with the body. The body behaviors are the same. But let's continue. And even so, depending on the path of that body towards liberation. If it was a long path, that means that that body was accustomed to new habits, new behaviors, more aligned with the spiritual principles. Someone that worked to become untouched by all these currents, has transformed his lower nature accordingly to this. So after liberation, these behaviors are more visible. Or another one that was more fast and there was no time to change these behaviors. And many different things can happen. I will not go into others, so that we don't create more confusion. He who has given up worldly attachment from his mind, who is beyond the pairs of opposites, and who is free from desire, to him no experience coming as a matter of course causes either pleasure or pain. So, if he has given up worldly attachment from his mind, who is beyond the pair of opposites, so this is here, from his mind. It's important because attachment is in the mind. It doesn't matter if the objects are there or not. But people delude themselves with these concepts because it's much easier to renunciate if the objects are not there than if the objects are there. But what doesn't mean is that if the objects are there, that you really reach renunciation. And it doesn't really mean that if the objects are there, that you will not reach renunciation. But it's by far more difficult. By far more difficult. But people like to delude themselves. So if he is beyond the pairs of opposites, and he is free from desire, to him no experience coming as a matter of course, according to the prarabdha karma, the karma that brought forth the life of that body. So those experiences will not cause either pleasure or pain. So these were the questionings of Ashtavakra so that Janaka can explain better or even reevaluate his own experience, his own assessment. So this is what the master does.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.